comments?
It's done before it gets filled up.
Deanne?
Callender,
Yes.
Simpson,
Yes?
Becker,
Yes.
Sauer,
Yes.
McBain,
Yes.
Schlenker.
Yes.
Resolution number 15-R-478, first reading. A resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application with the DARE Grant Office of the Attorney General's Office for funding assistance of the DARE program.
So moved. Second.
Any comments?
Just a question, Chief. Have you ever applied for a dog, or does the Columbiana have a dog?
I'm sorry, sir, say that again.
Have you ever applied for a dog for Columbiana, or is it,
We have not.
or don't you want a dog?
Well, it's an interesting question because you may or may not know, I commanded the canine unit when I worked in Virginia, and I'm a certified dog handler. One of the things about having a dog, aside from the expense and the cost of it, which can be fairly considerable, because you have to house it, feed it, vet care, is you have to keep it busy. At this point in time, it'd be very hard for us to keep a dog busy to the level, say, of some of the surrounding areas that have more activity for that type of an animal.
That's good news.
It is good news in a way, and then the other piece of it is simply that the Supreme Court has just ruled, I just gave a copy of this to Dan, that some of the traffic stops now are being deemed to have been too long for the use of the dog, and they're trying to separate the dog sniffs on cars from the traffic safety angle, and there may be a whole shift in paradigm on the way we use dogs.
Okay.
But having one would certainly be a benefit. It's just at this point, I can't justify to you or even to myself the cost of having one against the benefits of having one. Hope we don't get there.
Resolution number 15-R-479, first reading.
We'll need to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought they come from the after.
Sauer,
Yes.
McBain,
Yes.
Schlenker.
Yes.
Callender,
Yes.
Simpson,
Yes?
Becker,
Yes.
Now, resolution number 15-R-479, first reading. A resolution accepting monies from the Columbiana County Board of Commissioners to be used exclusively for wages and related benefits to permit the City of Columbiana Police Department to assign an officer to the Columbiana County Drug Task Force.
So moved. Second.
Any comments?
Chief, is it worth our while? I know it's worth our while.
I think that the contribution by commissioners makes it worth our while. If we had to fund the entire time, it'd be less attractive. Again, we don't have open-air drug dealing at this point in time in our city. We do have drugs in our city, obviously, and they're everywhere. But the intelligence that we gather from participating in this group and the resources it brings to bear on the problems that we do uncover make it absolutely worthwhile, in my opinion. We get far more out of it than we put into it, and we occasionally get a little bit of money. We just gave Mike a check for a few $1,000s from the prosecutor's office as a direct result of funds that are shared back with the localities to be used for purposes of enhancing drug enforcement in our own community. So I would say that beyond the money we get from commissioners, add that to that money, plus the benefits we get through enforcement intelligence, I think it's worthwhile.
Have we ever made a stop to that house that keeps letting the garbage pile up at least?
We have a number of those. We're underway with that now. Of course, there are time frames that toll on these things, but working with Augie over in the Building and Zoning Department, we are working on a number of properties, including that one, to force that cleanup.
They cleaned it up, and they're already 2 days later. There was 7, 8 bags out.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. He got the thing into compliance, and now he's back out. So
Within a day, I mean,
I don't know what's up with that.
I understand how you can do it without garbage. I mean, unless maybe.
I can't imagine how you produce that much, because of course those are something they look at.
Gordon.
I thought maybe cooking.
One more thing I would add to the drug task force thing is that we have on staff, paid for by the county, a certified guy that is able to actually clean up and mitigate meth labs. That is a hazmat scene. It is an enormously expensive proposition if you don't have that. We have it in-house, and I'm always a firm believer if you can have it in-house, especially at no cost to us. It's really great to have, so that's another thing we have to cover.
Any other comments? Deanne?
Schoniger?
Yes.
Callender?
Yes.
Simpson?
Yes?
Becker?
Yes.
Souter?
Yes.
McBain?
Yes.
Ordinance number 15-0-2816, first reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Dallas Dawson and Associates, civil engineers and surveyors for the purpose of providing engineering services for the Silent Railroad Crossing project for the city of Columbiana.
So moved. Second.
Any comments?
Yes, I do have a comment. I was under the assumption that we were going to seek some assurance from Mr. Flynn that they would stay there if this was done. If we proceed with this engineering, we'll spend the money without that insurance. Am I wrong on that?
Did you have any comment?
I would like assurance, if we agree and do all this, some assurance from GM or Mr. Flynn that he's gonna stay on South Main Street.
If I may approach,
You may.
I'm attorney Rob Buffard, and I'm attorney for the Flynn Auto Group. Was here 2 weeks ago, and in terms of assurance, that's sort of a subjective word. I can tell you that my client fully intends to remain in the city, wants to remain in the city. Beyond that, in my estimation, is assurance. But in terms of General Motors, as I alluded to last meeting, they are the Goliath, and they do not get involved in making commitments to an individual dealership such as this in terms of, because there are so many other factors and variables involved in the dealer agreement. Multiply that number of factors times the number of dealers that are under the GM banner. It just couldn't be managed. But go ahead.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Could we have a copy of the correspondence from GM saying that this is a condition of Mr. Flynn staying there?
There is no correspondence. It's been all verbal notification at this point.
That's hard to believe.
I have one comment also about General Motors. I wasn't here at the last meeting. I read in the paper that the comment was made that you guys would be probably having to move your business to a Donnell location in Boardman. I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around the fact that General Motors would want those Cadillacs sitting next to a Ford product.
Okay, let me explain that a little further. There is a site north of Donnell Ford that has been considered for the relocation of the Cadillac brand. And then, so in terms of, those are all possibilities. What I'm here to request of council, as I did 2 weeks ago, is for your continuing support and for you to know that time and energy is being devoted by Mr. Flynn to stay right where he is, to continue to be a member of this city. So,
You couldn't even get a letter to that intent?
no, sir.
Well, from a cost standpoint, wouldn't it cost Mr. Flynn a lot more to pick up and move to Boardman than to maybe help some with this expense? Unless maybe there was a conversation that I don't know about from 2 weeks ago. Was that on the table? And that would probably show some willingness that he intends to stay.
How can I put this? It is uncertain in terms of a plan, okay? it's been indicated if GM decides to relocate the dealership, and understand, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago too, that this is a franchise, that it's GM's franchise, and subject to the dealer agreement and its renewal, GM, from time to time, reviews the dealership fiscal plan and location and so forth. So, to get a more direct answer to the question, the exact terms of any such relocation haven't been finalized, but I can say that in other situations, oftentimes there is some incentives to relocate offered by the manufacturer, not just GM, but other manufacturers.
So, as an attorney, you're saying GM just converses with the dealership verbally, they don't write things down, they have no contracts, they have no directions. I can't believe as an attorney you deal that way, you put everything on paper.
Well, as an attorney, I'm going to dodge that question with a very vague answer. I can represent to you that there is nothing in writing about the quiet zone at this point in time.
But you know there is one.
Pardon?
There is one, but it's a ghost out there somewhere.
No, I think there's nothing written that I'm aware of.
But I would like to have some assurance, we're gonna spend a bunch of money, and then if in 2 weeks later, we get a notice to see in the paper that Mr. Flynn decided to move, and I want Mr. Flynn to
But it's not just
stay here
Mr.
more-
Flynn's decision, though.
more than
Understand
anybody.
that. And
What is the ruling? Or does GM have a ruling for a certain mile of distance between dealerships who run Cadillacs?
there's the 10-mile rule in the state of Ohio, as it exists in most others.
And is Mr. Flynn in violation of that 10-mile rule or some other dealership? Or
If-
where we can only be in
if
one
Board-
county or?
Now, if Boardman were, that site were considered, it would be outside the 10 miles. It's my understanding.
There was an agreement originally with Stadium that it is within the 10 mile, I guess. They're together.
I'm here to represent the council that since the last meeting, I think your action in proposing this ordinance and passing is the kind of significant progress that can be shown. Now, at some point, can we come back to council and say what GM's reaction to that significant progress is? I'd certainly be happy to, but at this point in time,
I have one more question, and
Sure.
I'll shut up. Could we have a letter from Mr. Flynn saying that barring GM saying he has to move, he will stay here?
well, here again, I'd be
That's
happy to work
barring
with.
GM.
I'd be happy to work with Attorney Blaisdell on
Or, you know,
the
barring
content.
GM.
I understand what you're after. You're looking for assurance,
Yeah,
and that's understandable.
to say, this letter could say barring GM ordering him to leave, that he will keep his dealership in South Main Street.
Well, now you've brought it down to a micro level where the same kind of variables and factors that might be involved,
I understand.
you know, so again, subject to Attorney Blaisdell and
understand
I
that.
coming up with something that would
I understand.
give you that comfort feel. But he's been here for 40 years.
I understand.
He's made investments after investments in the dealership, upgrades, et cetera,
I understand he's done a terrific job.
and he does not want to go in.
I just bought a Lincoln off from 3 weeks ago.
I would.
Duly noted on the record.
You think that's workable, Dan, barring an order from GM, that he would, I don't know if it would be binding, but it would at least be an assurance that he is intent.
I think, I understand the comfort that you're seeking, but I think if you look at
See, we're spending
the
taxpayer
present,
money.
I understand that. If you look at the present and the recent past, you know, he votes with his pocketbook where he wants to be. And
You should have no problem writing a letter saying.
well, again, as his lawyer, I'd have to give serious consideration, but if it's something that Dan and I can work on as this project moves forward,
Before the second reading, in 2 weeks, you could do that?
we certainly try.
What if we did a first reading tonight and then table the second reading until we receive an assurance?
Well, we wouldn't table the second reading tonight, we table it if it
Well,
wasn't there.
I'm just letting,
Yeah,
that shows our intent to proceed, but not without assurances.
Just to be clear, so
let's be clear.
we try to be clear, a little clearer than we are, you know. It's one thing to say, by way of a letter from Mr. Flynn, I don't want to leave, and unless I'm forced to leave,
No,
I
no,
won't.
no, I don't want to leave, I do not
I
intend to leave,
understand.
barring GM's order.
But the focus here is on the train whistle. So will the assurance be, if we resolve the train whistle issue, will that be taken
Yeah,
off the
okay.
table?
Okay.
I think that's the focus of
Okay,
this,
let's
rather
change that
than-
letter. If we resolve the train's whistle, barring an order from GM, he will stay there.
Well, again, I think Dan and I can come up with language that is not coercive or
That's a good-
objectionable.
That's a good word, coercive. You can make this agreement 7 pages long, I don't care, as long as Dan says what we want.
There already is a letter, as I recall, in the file, is there not, that expresses, and I could maybe take a moment to find it, but Mr. Flynn's support of the quiet zone in so many words.
Oh, I support it too, but I want some assurance if we do support it, that it's gonna do something.
If a letter simply states that an assurance of us moving forward the quiet zone will remove that issue off the table, doesn't actually remove any issue from the table, other than the quiet zone itself. If you're saying that there's nothing from GM saying that is the number one reason for doing this move in the first place, but a second ago you said that he votes with his pocketbook and there are incentives to move. That would have nothing to do with a train signal.
Well, contrary to the incentives that may exist, I'm saying that Mr. Flynn's intent is to stay put. And I said that 2 weeks ago, and I'll say that.
Can I ask you this, has it not been GM's intention all along to move Cadillac to Mahoney County, barring a train whistle?
I can't answer that.
I think you can.
I'm not GM. I don't speak for GM. I'm not here for GM.
Okay,
May I have a turn?
yeah, go for it.
You guys have badgered this poor gentleman something terrible.
He isn't bleeding.
I really apologize for the beat you got. You ready for another one?
Yeah, I knew that was coming. You were setting me up. Sure.
Well, we referred to him, Mr. Flynn. Dave and I have been friends for a long time. And primarily, we're looking at this quiet zone crossing mostly to benefit Dave. Not that it wouldn't benefit me. I cross that tracks dozens of times a day, and the crossing will be safer. It'll benefit everybody that lives on the south side because we will be making a safer crossing, okay? But right now, we're looking, investing, how much? I didn't
$294,600.
want to use my own numbers, okay? And we're out bumming money, looking for grants, looking to invest our own money, et cetera, et cetera. Is Dave willing to throw in a little in this pot? Because we're primarily doing it for him.
The insurance company, Zurich, and as well General Motors, advises strongly against investing in a public project for fear of, God forbid, there's an accident and there's a liability issue, that he as a private individual would be looped into, or lumped in, I should say, into
You can make a contribution to the city. and we can-
Yeah, there's all kind of ways around that. You're a lawyer.
You understand where I'm coming from?
Sure I do.
And like I say, we'll all benefit from it. Quiet zone, yes. Like I told you, the last meeting, sometimes it sounds like that locomotive's coming right through my living room, particularly nowadays when I got the windows open, okay? But I've also lived with the train whistle since 1956. And I imagine I can live my next 20 years with it if I need to. We're doing stopping the whistle noise basically for Dave, and I think the village should consider the fact that he'd be willing to chip in and give us a hand with it.
He could buy us the bucket truck, it's the same amount of money. we
That's
paid
right.
For the train.
That's right.
It's exactly, for almost identical things.
I don't think Rob's gonna comment on it.
I know he is. I just love to get out a lawyer.
It's great to throw him under the bus.
Well, I do appreciate your time in considering it and would ask your continued support of the project. And as I say, in terms of my estimation anyway, it's significant progress, and it's the kind of progress that we need to show to keep Columbiana, Buick, Chevrolet, Cadillac right where it is.
Will you be back the next council meeting, sir,
Be happy to.
to give us an update?
Be
Well,
happy to.
now, more than that, though, you and Dan, before I'll vote the second time, you and Dan have to see if you can get a letter of some kind of intent.
Well, if I'm hearing you, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's saying there are a lot of reasons that.
I understand
could
that.
Result in Mr. Flynn being pulled out of.
I understand that, but I
We're only
borrowed
interested-
the order from GM.
We're only interested in the whistle issue.
Yeah.
Because that's what brought this all to a head. So
But-
I think we can address the whistle issue. Now, whether we can do it in a way that satisfies you or not, I don't know. But we
My
can certainly
question
try.
is, if we address the whistle issue, barring GM ordering him to leave, is he going to intend to stay?
Well, I'm hearing you say yes.
The intent is yes.
So I want
Subject-
that in writing.
Yeah, I think he would say that, for
I
sure.
want that in writing.
Well, Dan is your lawyer, so he and I sure can work something out.
As long as we're focused on that issue, we can't address all this other collateral stuff because.
I said barring GM's orders, but I want some intent that if we spend this money that, how many classes do voters take through school to avoid answering your questions?
As many as politicians.
They equal?
I have a citizen lives on that side of town. My bigger question is before the city would consider spending $300,000, whether it be for Dave Flynn's dealership or not, is has the Federal Railroad Administration been contacted that they can bless off on it after this would be done?
Yeah,
Because if they won't bless off on it, I mean, we're kind of.
they want it, they like it, they wanted it safer.
And then if something would happen on there, who's the liable party? After this quiet zone's going to go back, that's my other question about it. Is the city liable because we put it in a quiet zone? Is the railroad liable? Is the FRA liable if there would be an accident or a fatality because somebody did enter into that crossing?
That's a good question.
The project would, is following Federal Railroad Administration, guidelines. And, we can work with Dallas and Dawson to answer those questions more specifically, but the index, the hazard index is, it's scientific, and you just plug it in. This is, it goes from 49 down to 19. It's safer on their terms. We're not creating the terms. We're not creating a hazard index, but we're impacting it by making it safe.
I think, the city's looking at this not only in the aspect of keeping Mr. Flynn here, but a safety issue. It's as much a safety issue as I think Mr. Flynn has kind of spearheaded it, but I think it's a good move as far as a safety issue. And I think that's where we got to
I
kind of
agree,
look at.
I agree 100%, but the people on Northwest Street, if we spend $300,000 so it doesn't go into their basements, they would really have a problem with us spending money on a railroad that's working.
Okay.
I guess the other question I have, and I know there's support for it, but if you put the median up, particularly on Fairfield Avenue and on Elm Street at that crossing, that's gonna impact businesses along that section. And I have trouble seeing how Riker is gonna get those big trucks out of there with those Legos.
They would not be able to get it as drawn in your drawings as submitted before. So, I actually called Dwayne Reichert, had a meeting with him. You know, we went over the current plans, and there was really no way that if those plans were to be, you know, carried out, that he could continue to work there.
Yeah.
So I picked up the phone, talked to Dallas Dawson, and there are other features that we could do there at that crossing that wouldn't be in grade median.
Okay, so I think anything we do at that crossing, well, the other one would be the plant where the brothers has the little plant. They have a store that they back trucks into on a regular basis, and I don't think they'd be able to do that without the median was there. But I think it's important to talk to those other businesses and make sure that anything we do doesn't compromise their operations.
Absolutely.
Do you have a question?
No, I had a comment. I'd suggest to Lowell that he request Dave Flynn come before the next council meeting and say that he does not want to leave Columbiana, and then you would have his assurance, and you would have it on record.
I would say that, Mr. Flynn, but as you and I get older, we hate to do things like that, and I can understand him wanting his attorney to do that for him. And I would trust it. I would trust the attorney to say what he said. I understand what you're saying, but I can understand that Mr. Flynn would get nervous and coming before a crowd. And it's much easier to pay somebody else to do it.
I don't think he'd get very nervous.
I'll say this, that Dave and I have talked about this crossing for 6-8 months, and he has said to me numerous times, he does not want to move.
I agree, but we're spending town money and we need something
Oh, I agree.
more than verbal, like supposedly GM does with their.
I don't disagree with you, but Dave did in fact tell me that from his own mouth.
He also told me.
I understand that.
After the last meeting, the first place he came was in my shop.
If something
He come to work the next
if
morning.
something goes wrong, though, we can say, well, they said it. Where's it written down? Where's something on paper?
Let's call for the question.
Good idea. Let's go home.
I would if you guys were talking.
Simpson?
Yes.
Becker?
Yes.
Souter?
Yes.
McBain?
Yes.
Schwanniger?
Yes.
Challenger? Yes.
Ordinance number 15-0-2817, first reading. An ordinance establishing a special fund known as the Silent Railroad Crossing Project Donation.
So moved.
Second.
This would be a good place for that.
Question. Let's say we establish this fund and we put a bunch of money into it and this whole thing falls through, what do we do with the money?
Give it back.
It does point up the reality that this project has several component parts, one of which is private, but there are two others. One's safety and noise. And whoever made the point that it doesn't affect everybody in town, that's accurate, but it does affect a substantial portion of the town in terms of noise and safety. So it's legitimate in the sense that it addresses public and private interests. And of course, as Rob pointed out last week, we have an interest. The city has an interest in keeping good businesses in town. I mean, they provide employment, they provide tax money. It's a legitimate consideration for this council.
Mr. Flynn is an asset to the town.
So
But up to this point, I've never heard anybody come and complain about the train whistles that live in the area. And I have had people complain about the flooding, so I'd have to, consider spending our money where it would do that to most people. Yes.
I understand that safety is a big concern, and I think that crossings would be beneficial, especially on Pittsburgh Street, where most of our students go across to get to school. But I don't understand how in any way, shape, or form that by silencing a train horn, you're going to increase safety.
Oh, it definitely works. They put barricades back like 125 feet. Once you pull into the train lane, the gates go down, you can't go around the
I understand that, but you're saying let's take the audible element out of something, and it's going to make it safer. It doesn't make sense.
Well, it doesn't make sense, it may not make sense to you on the surface, but it's basically an education process that, I mean, I literally have a 3-inch folder, you know, doing research on it, and it's their regulations that they're telling us, the Federal Railroad Administration is telling us that it will be safer after it gets done.
And I agree that the upgrading would be beneficial to everybody, it would decrease the possibility of somebody going around gates and whatnot. But silencing the whistle, that's your audible.
Well, if you don't silence the whistle, if all you do to those 3 crossings right now, the hazard index is 49,000, we'll say. If all you do is shut the whistles off, it doubles it. It goes, I think it goes to 98,000, which is very, very dangerous. We're gonna knock it clear down into the teens after doing that, and we would do that with the guidance of an engineer that's following these, you know, regulations. And as Attorney Brevard said, there are hundreds of these crossings across the United States. And they're engineered design. I think there's multiple ones in the city. I think there's like 50 in one city. So
It's 52 in Orange County alone.
Yeah, it's a proven method, but at some point you have to rely on the statistics and, you know, the engineering.
Any other comments from council? Dan?
Becker?
Yes.
Souter?
Yes.
McBain?
Yes.
Schwanneker?
Yes.
Callender? Yes. Simpson?
Yes.
Resolution number 15-R-480, an emergency. An emergency resolution in support of an amendment to Columbiana County's existing 911 final plan.
So moved.
Second.
You in favor of it, Chief? You drew it up.
Yeah, I sit on the committee, there's probably a couple things that need to be said, and I know everybody's getting weary of the long meeting, but if you can indulge me for a minute. The 911 final plan is a document that governs the system in the county, and a major amendment is necessary to that plan, mostly because of what they refer to as next generation 911. Our current equipment is 10 years old, it's beyond obsolete, way past its life cycle. There's also some changes in state law that impact this in terms of funding and the timelines for replacement. If we wait, state law begins to reduce the number of public safety entry points to from 5 we have now down to 4 in 2016, and to 3, and then down to 2. If we wait, we may not all get upgraded, we may end up needing a bill for that, so now is the time to support this. This resolution, more importantly to me, is this is our local voice. Without this, we have to have the approval of elected officials who represent 60% of the population to do this. That's your local voice and your control over what happens to you. The upgrade allows us to do things like, right now we couldn't receive a text message in a school shooting from a kid. Kids aren't going to call 911, they're going to text, they're going to send video. The new system allows us to receive that from the scene. Consolidates our hardware, moves us towards some cost savings in terms of all 5 PSAP sharing equipment as opposed to each of us having individual, separate, identical equipment in 5 locations. So that should help us to reduce costs, 911 call processing, community dispatch, audio logger recorder, all of our equipment that is computerized. It also addresses the dropping wireline revenue. Everybody's getting rid of their landline phones and keeping cell phones. Unfortunately, state law hasn't kept up with that, and the wireline revenues have dropped off where the funding is next to nothing now where it was really high. And we haven't made that up by having legislation to assess those fees and move them over to the wireless side of the house where cell phones are assessed, like wireline phones used to be. That needs to be done. My concerns are important, I think, to get on record too. We're going to be partnering with Morgan County. Morgan County pioneered this and did this a few years back. But the one concern I have is they use what I call the field of dreams approach. Build it and they will come. Nobody came. And so now we're at a point where it's a good idea and all that, but we have some unknowns. They're the host, and we're coming in, which helps them to offset their original investment. We don't know yet if that's going to be good for us as a locality or not. We suspect it is, but there's no guarantee. There's a large initial cash outlay to General Dynamics, who's the engineer on the firm, and the contractor on the firm. It also locks in General Dynamics as the sole source provider. Always scares me when you're locked in. It's not open-ended. They did have the most responsive quote in fairness to General Dynamics. The quotes received, they were the most responsive. But there are many hidden costs that may or may not be there that we don't know. And we don't know what we don't know. That's really scary. There was no independent consultant or expert used to review any of this. And nobody on the committee, in my estimation, including me, has the level of expertise necessary to really do an in-depth analysis of this thing. So we're relying on the research we've been able to do. And that brings me to Commissioner Weigel, who's the chairman. He spent an extraordinary amount of time researching this and doing his best to find out what all this means and to interpret that in terms of the Ohio Revised Code and what it means to us as a county and locality. And he's proposed a solution in the short term by virtue of going with General Dynamics and this upgrade in this way. I can tell you that he's passionate and he's convinced that this is the way to go. Time is critical. The people we had examine our current system, when Bob Evans left, called it a time bomb, which means it can fail catastrophically at any point without warning. That's not good in a 911 system. We're in a position where we pretty much got to believe the assurances that Commissioner Weigel's made and given us about this course of action and these decisions and the Commissioner's intentions. He's clearly and unequivocally stated publicly and on the record that we should assume that this is the way to go, and his research shows that. We should assume he's an honorable man with all of our best interests at heart who means what he says. And I think that's fair. We also should support this resolution because I don't think there's going to be a better time than now, and I don't think it's going to get any easier, and it'll probably become more costly. So in a nutshell, that's how I feel about it. If you're interested in exactly what's going to change, I can tell you that in detail. It's mind-numbingly technical. If you want that, I can do that. I'd answer any questions.
That's a good top view of it.
Thank you.
I've worked with Commissioner Weigel on several things, and I think your assessment, from what I believe is the chief architect, I think your assessment of the project is probably also correct. I think we need before
McBain?
Yes.
Schwanker?
Yes.
Callender? Yes. Simpson?
Yes.
Becker?
Yes.
Sauer?
Yes.
Council comments?
I have one comment. I realize the meeting is a little longer than normal, but I think as long as we're accomplishing something, it's important. To stay right there and stay at task and get it done. And I have one question. How's the water plant coming?
And,
When do we go to bid?
I don't have the exact schedule yet, but as I said, I met all the deadlines that we needed to, especially that special council meeting. And, I've been in contact with the several times since getting our data. I think we're rolling, so I'll try to have a better timeline for you next meeting.
I would like to comment that contrary to what he might think, I'm 100% behind Mr. Flynn staying in Columbiana. But we do need answers to some questions if we're spending city money. And I want that assurance, that's all.
Yeah, we have many other things going on in town at the same time, between the park and the pocket park and rainwater, many different things going on. To convert that much on a whole, not why.
Correction. Someone said this project was 295, is it 200 or 100?
194,000.
Okay. There was a misconception.
194,000.
$100,000 is a big difference.
Yeah.
I heard 294.
It's
192.
Mhm.
I'm going with that.
I have really quick. In the mayor's court software that we invested in last year, it's installed, implemented, and the last 3-4 months or so, it's been going very good. Maria, who does all the clerk work for the mayor's court, has brought a recommendation to me that's been uncovered through the software. Currently, you guys made a change last year for mayor's court cost to $64 and $74. The software, from what she's being told from every other mayor's court that runs the program, they do not have separate fees for traffic court costs as one, and non-moving violations is a separate cost. They have one. And instead of 64 and 74 that we have now, she is making the recommendation that we make it a flat 74, because what happens if it's a traffic violation now, $10 of that is set aside to go to the state by law. And the way the software works and is all pre-designed is if it's not a traffic violation that goes to the state, it would just roll back to the city. But we don't have that now, because we're losing it. So something to consider, making that change.
We can change that anytime traffic.
Yes, I'm just bringing that for a discussion or something for
Yeah,
for your
I think that's what
consideration.
they're looking into, and if that's the case, we should consider
Just one.
revisiting the court cost issue.
Yeah, so there was that one, and then I received, I think several of you all, you received something from Josh Mandel's office about the online checkbook through the treasurer's office. I personally think it's a good idea. I called down to the treasurer's office the other day just to ask them about what it entailed. I mean, would it be a lot of work for Mike or something that we would have to do? And they said that right now it's something that they suggest, first of all, won't be up and running until like June 30th, but that it's a phone call that we could make to their IT people. They would need to know what kind of software that we run. And from there, we would run like a common delimited file, an Excel file. They upload that, they take care of it, and they suggest doing like a once a year type thing, like 2014, because it's already done. So we're not like monthly updating that, or it's just one time a year. He said it takes 5-10 minutes. So in doing so, I mean, we could be more transparent and make our books available to our residents for a 5 to 10 minute labor expense. Just want to bring that up as something that maybe we should consider.
Well, Brian, I can tell you, our current software is SSI, Software Solutions, and they do a lot of municipalities throughout the state. So this is probably something they may be working on.
Yeah.
And it's probably just a quick fix. And
they said that we just give them the brand, and they've got the company that they've hired to do is like online solutions, something like, I can't remember it all down.
they do a lot of municipalities, so I'm sure that they're ready.
He didn't think it would be an issue, but I didn't want to even say, hey, we should do this without, I called them to see what kind of work and burden it put on you. And they said it's 5-10 minutes a year. So it's not a big deal, it's something that we should look into. They said it doesn't require a motion or an ordinance or anything on our part at this point, so much as just our willingness to work with them to get that file. So I wanted to put that out there. And the last thing is I've received over the last 2-3 weeks 4 or 5 pretty serious complaints about the traffic backup at 7th and Main when church is being released. And it's because of the timing of the lights.
I'll call HRG and let them know.
It's something to check into. But if it was from 1 or 2 to 1, I've received 4 or 5, and I know they've heard it from people. And
I've received 2 and since it's been done.
I don't know that it's a big deal, but I think it's worth at least validating or checking to see if it's an issue.
Well, I would even comment further that it seems to me with nothing other than just traveling through the intersection occasionally, that particularly in the quote evening rush hour, the backups on Main Street are much, much longer than what they used to be before we supposedly sequenced the lights and everything. I mean, the turn lanes and everything help a lot. Those are wonderful. But I've had a couple times where I've sat a couple times at 14 and then another couple times at the Y. And in fact, I had one time where I couldn't even cross 14 because of the backup going south. So I'm not sure they're properly timed at this point for heavy traffic. They may not have to be looked at.
Chief, didn't we, when we did that, it was decided it wasn't going to improve the flow, just the safety.
That was what we were told, and I brought that, if you remember, I brought that exact point up that, may or may not help the congestion problems, but it certainly improves the safety. I can attest to that. We haven't had a crash, I don't think, at that intersection since they've graded it, but I agree that the backups are a little bit more significant, although they're not all that bad in terms of a metropolitan area. It's maybe bad for us because we're not used to it. It's not that bad, it moves pretty well. The biggest problem we have, frankly, is people anticipating the backup, and they don't want to be caught by the light in the middle of the intersection, which blocks the next light cycle coming the other way, and we're trying to work on that.
The complaints I receive were like after church lets out.
Yeah, that's a problem there because
like they said,
you get all those people.
Cars can get out, and that's it. And
They-
then it turns.
Another thing, it could be maybe you work with the church, if they turn left and go up Firestone and go out 6th or 5th Street.
I mean, they can do that, you put you in a position of coming out of now an uncontrolled intersection,
If they go up to.
but on Sunday, that may not be a problem.
Go up to Salem Street, it's not that big of a,
And they could
especially
do
if you're
that.
going left.
I just wanted to bring it to council's attention. Anything else?
Motion adjourned.